Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with this: silence is never just silence. When someone stops communicating, they've already started communicating something deeper. And when a man grows quiet, truly quiet, he's not just tired or distracted or busy, he's already made a decision. When a man goes silent, it can feel like a confusing gray area. Like something is wrong but you can't quite name it. You replay conversations, read into short texts, and convince yourself that maybe he's just stressed, distracted, or emotionally unavailable for the moment. But silence is not a pause button. It is not a waiting room for love. Silence is decision already in motion. It's not a mystery to solve, it's a message to interpret. When someone values you, they make sure you know it. Silence is what you hear when their interest fades, when their intentions change, or when their courage to tell the truth fails. Many people try to sugarcoat silence as emotional complexity. They say things like, he's just processing, or he's not good at expressing himself. But people make time and space for what matters to them. If someone can spend hours on their phone, watching videos, or replying to others, and yet somehow doesn't have the time or energy to message you back or explain what's going on, that's not complexity. That's a decision. It doesn't need decoding. It needs clarity from you. You don't need to interpret what they aren't saying. You need to ask yourself why you're tolerating the silence at all. Choosing yourself in the face of someone else's silence isn't easy. We're often taught to be patient, to give people space, to not seem too emotional or needy. But silence creates a vacuum where your self-esteem starts to echo. You begin to doubt yourself. You think maybe you were too much, maybe you expected too much. But here's what actually happens: their silence becomes a mirror that reflects how little they are willing to invest. And in that moment, you're faced with the choice: to wait, to walk, to diminish yourself, or to choose yourself. Choosing yourself means understanding that love doesn't have to be gigged for. You don't need to chase someone to prove your worth. Silence is the point where your power begins. It's the point where you get to say, I will no longer interpret silence as confusion, I will take it as clarity. It's the decision to stop asking, why isn't he calling, and start affirming, if he wanted to, he would. It's in these moments that self-respect is built, not in grand gestures, but in quiet acts of self-protection, turning off notifications that bring you anxiety, stopping yourself from sending one more text that will only make you feel smaller, sitting in the discomfort of not knowing, and still choosing to walk forward. That is choosing yourself. Silence often feels like rejection. But more than that, it's redirection. When someone withdraws their voice, their energy, they're showing you exactly where you don't belong. And where you don't belong is the beginning of where you can finally belong to yourself. It's in the absence of their attention that you discover how much your own attention matters. You begin to pour into yourself. You create boundaries. You build standards. You stop needing closure from them and start creating closure within. This is not about playing games. This is not about waiting for him to return so you can feel chosen again. It's about realizing that someone who genuinely wants you will never choose silence over clarity. They will never leave you in emotional limbo because they understand your value. When someone falls silent, that's the moment you rise. Because you know that silence is not a mystery to solve, it's a message to receive. And the message is this: choose you. When someone truly values something, they protect it, prioritize it, and stay connected to it. People don't let go of what they're afraid to lose. When you matter to someone, they make sure you feel seen, heard, and acknowledged. But when communication fades and the effort disappears, the silence speaks louder than any excuse. It reveals what's really happening beneath the surface. Finally see your worth. It reveals what they truly value, and what they don't. And when you find yourself being met with silence from someone you care about, that's the moment where your choice becomes clear. You either lower your standards to mere silence, or you choose yourself and walk. Choosing yourself means paying attention to action, not potential. It's easy to romanticize someone's past effort, or the version of them you saw once, or the connection you imagined could grow. But silence strips away illusion. If someone values you, you won't have to guess. You won't be confused. They will show up, even in hard moments, because what matters is worth fighting for. Silence then is not just absence. It's avoidance. It's a sign that they don't see the connection the same way you do, or worse, that they do see it and still choose not to fight for it. That realization can be painful, but it's also empowering. When you realize that people don't go quiet on what they value, you stop making excuses for them. You stop internalizing their withdrawal as something wrong with you. You stop wondering what you did, what you said, or what you could fix. You start asking better questions of, why am I tolerating behavior that feels like rejection? And why am I chasing after someone who doesn't value communication, effort, or respect? Those questions lead to one answer, because somewhere along the line, you forgot that your value doesn't depend on how someone else sees you. Choosing yourself means no longer trying to reconvince someone of your worth. You don't need to become more patient, more understanding, or more forgiving to earn someone's attention. If they went quiet, they made a choice. And now it's your turn to make one. You either settle for someone who doesn't value you, or you realign with your own value and walk away. That decision changes everything. It shifts the dynamic. You're no longer waiting for their text, their call, or their explanation. You're no longer clinging to something that's already let go of you. Instead, you begin rebuilding your self-respect from the silence they left behind. There is nothing stronger than a woman who chooses herself when someone else chooses silence. That kind of strength doesn't from pride or ego. It comes from knowing that love should feel safe, consistent, and mutual. When someone goes quiet, they create space. Space for you to step in and take the lead in your own life again. That space allows clarity to surface, and in that clarity, you stop chasing energy that isn't chasing you. You start investing in what reflects your worth back to you. People who value don't disappear when things get hard. They communicate through it. They work through it. They lean in, not pull away. If someone can go silent when you needed connection the most, it's because they never valued the connection enough to begin with. And when you see that clearly, your only option is to stop pouring into something that no longer pours back. Choosing yourself is not an act of revenge. It's an act of returning to truth. And the truth is simply, people don't go quiet on what they're afraid to lose. So when they go quiet on you, stop waiting, stop hoping, and start choosing. Choose to walk where you are valued, not just tolerated. Silence is often misunderstood as confusion or indecision, but more often, it's clarity wrapped in avoidance. When someone chooses silence instead of an honest conversation, it doesn't mean they don't know how they feel. It usually means they know exactly how they feel but lack the courage to say it out loud. They know the truth might hurt you, or create confrontation, or require emotional accountability they're not willing to face. So they stay quiet, hoping you'll take the hint, do the hard part for them, or slowly drift away on your own. But silence isn't neutral. It's a decision disguised as distance. And when you recognize that silence is clarity without courage, that's when you stop waiting for words and start making decisions based on action. Choosing yourself in this moment means refusing to be left in emotional limbo. When someone is silent, they're communicating, they're just doing it passively. Their silence says, I'm not willing to have the hard conversation. Or, I've already emotionally checked out. Or even, I'm hoping you'll walk away so I don't have to end it. Instead of respecting you with honesty, they retreat. And if you mistake that silence for uncertainty, you'll end up waiting, overanalyzing, and doubting your worth in the process. But clarity doesn't always come with words. Sometimes, it comes with the absence of them. And when someone doesn't give you the closure you deserve, you give it to yourself by recognizing their silence as a complete answer. When you choose yourself, you step into the role of your own protector. You stop begging for someone to explain their absence. You stop accepting minimal effort in the hope that things will go back to how they used to be. You stop giving more of yourself to someone who won't even give you a sentence. Courageous love requires courageous communication. If someone doesn't have the strength to be honest, they're not strong enough to love you the way you deserve to be loved. Choosing yourself means you no longer accept the silence as space for hope. You accept it as proof of their decision, and you make your own. The temptation to stay, to wait, to decode the quiet moments is rooted in fear. The fear of being wrong, of letting go too soon, or of closing a door that might reopen. But when you view silence as clarity, you realize that keeping the door open is keeping pain open. You realize that someone who values the connection will risk discomfort to protect it. They'll have the hard conversations. They'll be honest, even when it's messy. Silence, then, is not a lack of feeling, it's a lack of emotional maturity. And your peace is too valuable to sacrifice for someone who won't speak truthfully. In See Your Worth, there's a quiet strength choosing yourself when someone else goes silent. It's not loud or dramatic. It's a calm decision to no longer participate in one-sided conversations. It's waking up to the truth that love doesn't ask you to shrink, to wait, or to beg. It asks you to rise, to know, and to walk away when you're no longer met with the same energy. When you understand that silence is clarity without courage, you stop needing someone to spell it out. You take what's unsaid as seriously as what is, and you choose yourself with dignity. You don't chase after unfinished sentences or partial feelings. You don't cling to potential. You let the silence speak, and then you respond with action. You create closure by recognizing the truth that, if they were brave enough to care deeply, they would be brave enough to say it. And if they can't be honest, they can't be yours. Choosing yourself means being the courageous one when someone else can't. It means hearing what their silence says, and saying to yourself, I deserve more than this. Silence in a relationship, especially when it's sudden or prolonged, creates a powerful emotional void. It makes you question what went wrong, what changed, and whether you did something to cause it. But while silence can be painful, your response to that silence comes a direct reflection of how you see yourself. The way you handle being ignored, neglected, or emotionally ghosted tells you more about your self-worth than their behavior ever could. When you choose yourself, your response to silence shifts from anxious pursuit to confident detachment, because you no longer tie your value to someone else's ability to show up for you. When someone you care about withdraws and for no explanation, the instinct is often to fix, chase, or clarify. You send one more message, initiate one more call, or find one more excuse for their behavior. But every time you do this, you quietly send yourself a message too, that their silence is more important than your dignity, that their attention is more valuable than your peace. Responding to silence by overgiving or over-explaining doesn't bring clarity, it creates emotional imbalance. It puts your worth in the hands of someone who's already shown they're not handling it with care. When you have high self-worth, you don't run after silence. You recognize that no response is a response. And you honor yourself by not chasing it. Choosing yourself means you stop measuring your value based on someone else's behavior. You don't need someone to validate your presence by giving you the bare minimum. You don't fight for a place in someone's life when they've shown they're not fighting for you. Silence gives you a mirror. If you react by shrinking, overthinking, or compromising your standards, it's a sign there's healing to be done. If you respond with strength, clarity, and boundaries, it's proof that your self-worth is rooted internally, not externally. It's not that silence doesn't hurt. It does. It can feel like rejection, abandonment, or emotional punishment. But the difference lies in how you handle that hurt. Do you let it convince you're not enough? Or do you use it as a reason to stand taller in your own truth? Choosing yourself means you don't negotiate with silence. You don't stay in spaces where you feel emotionally invisible. You don't try to prove your worth to someone who's already decided not to recognize it. You withdraw your energy, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. People who truly know their worth don't need to fill silence with desperate effort. They understand that a connection that requires chasing isn't a connection built on mutual value. So they stop. They stop giving, trying fixing. And in that space they remember who they are. They remember that love should feel safe, mutual, and intentional. Responding to silence with grounded detachment is one of the most powerful forms of self-love. It says, I will not beg to be seen. I will not beg to be heard. I am worthy of someone who speaks when it matters. Your reaction to silence becomes a standard you set for all future relationships. It teaches others how to treat you. It shows that you have limits, that your heart is not a place for emotional inconsistency, and that if someone chooses distance, you will not meet them there. You will move forward. Choosing yourself is the moment you decide that your peace is more important than prolonging confusion. It's choosing to stop explaining yourself to someone who isn't listening, and start listening to the part of you that's been craving clarity. Because the silence may be their decision, but how you respond is entirely yours. And in that response, your worth is revealed. The right person brings clarity, not confusion. When someone genuinely wants you in their life, they don't leave you in a constant state of questioning. You don't find yourself second-guessing their intentions, analyzing their words, or overthinking their silence. Instead, you feel secure, prioritized, and emotionally seen. When a person is emotionally invested, they make their feelings known. They communicate through the hard moments, they reassure when things feel uncertain, and they are consistent in their presence. Choosing yourself means recognizing that emotional guessing games are not a sign of love, but of misalignment, and you no longer accept confusion as a normal part of connection. Being left to guess where you stand with someone chips away at your self-worth. You find yourself trying to read between the lines of every message, decoding every delay, and justifying every inconsistency. But healthy love isn't something that needs to be constantly deciphered. It is expressed with intentionality. When you choose yourself, you stop settling for half answers and mixed signals. You begin to understand that if someone truly cares, they won't risk losing you by being vague. They will communicate, clarify, and correct the course if things begin to feel distant. They won't play with your heart like it's something replaceable. The need to constantly wonder where you stand becomes emotionally exhausting. It keeps you in a state of emotional imbalance, where your happiness depends on how much effort someone decides to give on any given day. But real love provides safety. It does not fluctuate based on mood, distraction, or convenience. It shows up even when it's inconvenient. Choosing yourself means not entertaining relationships that thrive on uncertainty. It means stepping away from people who benefit from your confusion, and choosing environments where your heart is met with consistency. When you begin to embrace your self-worth, you no longer mistake emotional highs and lows for passion. You understand that intensity without consistency is manipulation. See your worth. You understand that someone who cares won't leave you spiraling for answers. They will give them freely because your peace matters to them. The right person won't just speak when it's easy, when it's see your worth. They'll show up when it's necessary. They won't avoid hard conversations. They won't leave you in silence hoping you'll figure it out on your own. They'll be clear, because they know clarity builds trust. Choosing yourself also means no longer over-explaining or over-performing to earn clarity. You stop thinking it's your job to manage someone's emotional immaturity. If someone can't tell you what they feel, what they want, or where they stand, that is their limitation, not a reflection of your worth. You stop chasing after emotional breadcrumbs, and you start recognizing your capacity to receive a full, nourishing connection. You stop accepting confusion as a challenge to be solved and begin treating it as a sign to step away. Emotional security isn't too much to ask for. It's the foundation of any healthy relationship. The right person will never make you compete for their attention. They will not use inconsistency to maintain control. They will not weaponize silence or distance. Instead, they will make their care visible. You'll know where you stand, not because you demanded it, but because they offered it freely. And when you choose yourself, you refuse to settle for anything less. Being left guessing becomes the red flag it always was, not something you normalize. You no longer feel flattered by being chosen inconsistently. You recognize that love is not real if it's not clear. And from that place of inner strength, you build boundaries that protect your peace. The right person won't make you beg for clarity. They'll give it because they value you. And choosing yourself means you wait for that, rather than accept the bare minimum disguised as connection. His silence is not a void to fill, it is a sign to read. When someone stops showing up with presence, communication, and clarity, they are revealing exactly how much emotional investment they are willing to offer. Silence may feel confusing on the surface, but underneath its direction, it tells you everything you need to know, even when words are spoken. When you choose yourself, you stop trying to pull answers from someone who has already withdrawn. You stop turning yourself into a question mark waiting for validation, and you start walking with certainty even in the face of their distance. Waiting on someone's silence is often disguised as patience, but it's actually avoidance of truth. It's the hope that maybe they'll come back, maybe they'll explain, maybe they'll realize what they lost. But someone who values you doesn't go silent and expect you to hold space in the dark. They communicate, even when it's uncomfortable. When you choose yourself, you stop treating silence as suspense and start treating it as resolution. You understand that no response is a response, and you shift your energy away from trying to be chosen, toward being whole on your own. The longer you stay tethered to someone's silence, the more you disconnect from your own inner voice. You stop asking what you'll want, because you're too focused on what they might be thinking or feeling. Choosing yourself means cutting that emotional cord. It means using the stillness not to wonder what went wrong, but to reconnect with your needs, your peace, and your future. Silence becomes the catalyst for your healing, not the reason for your breakdown. Instead of chasing closure, you become it. You don't need to beg for words. Because your value does not depend on someone else's willingness to express themselves. You don't need to wait for the right moment to walk away when they've already stopped showing up. His silence is not a gray area. It's not a challenge or a test. It's direction. And when you listen closely, it tells you that have outgrown spaces where you have to wonder if you're wanted. You stop interpreting silence as mystery and start responding to it with movement. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of a deep awareness that your heart is not a waiting room for someone else's indecision. Every moment you spend in someone's silence is a moment you lose in your own growth. When you choose yourself, you reclaim that time. You begin to pour energy back into yourself, into your boundaries, into your healing. You learn to stop knocking on doors that remain closed. You begin to trust that silence is not abandonment but redirection. It's a protective pause that gives you the chance to ask, what do I deserve? And answer honestly with action, not just reflection. Moving forward doesn't require a loud goodbye. Sometimes it's a quiet step in the opposite direction. It's waking up one day and deciding that you will not continue giving emotional access to someone who withholds basic communication. It's choosing to honor your needs over your fear of loss. It's understanding that anyone who truly values you will not leave you guessing, will not disappear into silence, and will not expect you to carry the weight of the relationship alone. Using his silence as your signal to move forward is not weakness, it's wisdom. It means you no longer sit in the waiting room of someone else's emotional limitations. You don't just walk away, you rise. You remind yourself that your love is a gift, not a request. And you walk in the direction of the life, peace, and partnership that sees you clearly and chooses you loudly.